Who's Michael?
My cousin.
Michael?
Yes.
Come.
At just 38 years old, the man thousands look to for healing and strength has finally confirmed what many feared. In one service, everything changed. His voice failed, his body weakened, and the room shifted from celebration to panic. But what he revealed afterward has left his followers heartbroken, and the full truth is only now coming to light. The church that once stood as a beacon of hope for so many now faced an uncertain future. The congregation could feel it, the shift from vibrant faith to raw vulnerability. It wasn't just the preacher's health at stake, it was the trust, the leadership, and the strength of the entire community. The service had started like any other, a church full of people eager to hear the dynamic words of Pastor Lovy Elias. He was known for his passionate preaching, his prophetic insight, and his ability to connect deeply with his congregation. Today, the energy in the room was electric. As Pastor Lovy took the pulpit, the worship team played softly in the background, setting a reverent tone. He began his sermon with the usual fervor, speaking of faith, strength, and God's promises. But something was off. His voice, usually so strong and commanding, started to falter. He paused. For a moment, the congregation thought it was just part of his dramatic delivery. But the silence stretched longer than usual. The atmosphere in the church shifted. At first, it was a subtle change, just a ripple of discomfort. But as Pastor Lovy's posture weakened, the concern in the air became palpable. His hand gripped the pulpit more tightly, as if trying to steady himself. His voice, once full of life and power, barely made it past a whisper. In the front rows, members of the congregation exchanged worried glances. The pastors and ushers on stage rushed in, sensing the gravity of the situation. A few gasps broke the silence, and within seconds, the atmosphere went from serene worship to anxious concern. The music softened, the choir sensing the shift. The room was no longer filled with the joy of celebration. It was now filled with a collective fear, one that no one could shake. As Pastor Lovy's condition grew more apparent, a wave of prayer erupted from the congregation. The powerful worshipers, who had once been singing in unison, now raised their hands in desperate intercession. Some knelt, others wept, and many of the church leaders gathered around the pulpit, creating a protective circle around their pastor. It wasn't just his health that was in jeopardy. It was the faith of everyone present. Mobile phones came out capturing the scene, and within minutes, clips of the unfolding crisis made their way onto social media, shared across Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. The entire Christian community, not just those in Los Angeles, now knew something was wrong. But what no one expected was how this moment would expose not just the vulnerability of their leader, but the deeper struggles within the modern church.
The news spread quickly, but what followed was a surprising response. As the crisis unfolded in real time, the congregation's reaction was one of unity and prayer. Despite the uncertainty, they stood together in faith, lifting their voices to God for healing and strength. It was a stark contrast to what the world might have expected: panic. Instead, the community rallied around their pastor with compassion and unwavering support. But even as prayers filled the air, behind the scenes, leaders were wrestling with their own questions. What had caused this sudden collapse? Was it simply exhaustion, or was there something deeper at play? The answers remained elusive, but one thing was certain: the life of their beloved pastor and the future of Revelation Church was now in the hands of something greater than human understanding. While the church continued to pray, Pastor Lovy's condition remained a mystery. Leaders quickly escorted him to a private room where medical help was on its way. His wife, prophetess Maggie, stood by his side, her face a mixture of faith and concern. The church was left in a tense silence. Congregants whispered among themselves, speculating about what had happened, yet no answers came. The leadership team acted swiftly, but the questions continued to swirl. How could this happen to someone so strong in faith? And what did it mean for the future of the ministry? As the minutes dragged on, the uncertainty gnawed at the hearts of those waiting. In the absence of answers, the church returned to what it knew best: prayer. But there was a growing sense that this was no ordinary crisis. As the crisis unfolded, something unexpected began to emerge on social media. While the initial wave of shock and prayer dominated, a different kind of conversation started to take shape. Critics began to question the toll that pastoring a megachurch could take on someone. How could a man who had given so much of himself, spiritually and emotionally, endure such a breakdown? Was the pressure too great? The idea of celebrity pastors came under fire, with some pointing to the unsustainable pace of leading a global ministry. With the story gaining traction online, a polarized conversation began. On one side, there were the faithful, rallying behind their pastor with words of encouragement. On the other, voices raised concerns about the demands of modern ministry, something many had long ignored. In the midst of the public debate, the leadership team at Revelation Church remained focused on one thing: Pastor Lovy's health. They withheld any specific medical details, respecting his privacy, but the speculation continued to grow. Theories ranged from exhaustion to something more serious. Some even questioned whether it was a divine message or warning. Despite these rumors, the congregation stayed united in prayer, refusing to let outside opinions shake their faith. Inside the church, whispers of a deeper issue began to surface. Had the relentless schedule, the emotional weight of ministry, and the spiritual warfare finally taken its toll on Pastor Lovy? And if so, what did that mean for the church that so many depended on him? The clock was ticking, and the congregation had no answers, only faith that God had a plan. As the days passed, rumors continued to circulate, but the church leadership remained firm in their resolve to protect Pastor Lovy's privacy. In the silence that followed, many began to reflect on the demands placed on their pastor and on leaders like him across the globe. This moment served as a wake-up call for many. Was it time to rethink how churches functioned and supported their leaders? The relentless expectations placed on pastors were now being questioned, with some calling for a more sustainable model of ministry that prioritized health and well-being over production. Pastor Lovy, who had spent years teaching about strength in the face of adversity, was now the embodiment of a lesson he had preached. The story of his sudden crisis was not just about one man. It was about the invisible burdens that come with leading others and the need for greater support and self-care in the ministry.
The days following Pastor Lovy's health scare left more questions than answers. Though he had begun to recover, the incident had left an indelible mark on both him and the church. His followers, once filled with certainty about his strength, now saw their pastor as vulnerable, just as human as the rest of them. Yet in that vulnerability, a new kind of strength was born. The church, despite its fear and uncertainty, had stood together in prayer. They hadn't just supported their pastor, they had supported each other. The world watched as their community, deeply rooted in faith, demonstrated that sometimes healing comes through shared struggle and prayer. But as Pastor Lovy began his recovery, one lingering question remained. Would this be a wake-up call for the church at large? Was it time to reevaluate the demands placed on spiritual leaders? And, more importantly, what would the future hold for the man who had once been untouchable in his faith?